welcome to this second round review of the Women's Rugby League World Cup. I'm your host, Super Saiyan Blue Lucario, so grab a cup of tea and join me as we dive right into the second round of action. First, Group A, with England against Canada. Canada dropped the ball from the first kickoff, and Leah Burke was able to crash over in the corner despite the best efforts of Laura Mariu. Nerves or a lack of patience were on show. Both sides began to trade mistakes in the wet, but England were getting on top. Big yards, strong carries up the middle of the field, causing Canada big problems. Canada, though, weren't intimidated. They put on some huge hits of their own to try and build some momentum. Then a penalty for a late hit on the kicker gave the Ravens a chance close to England's line, but the defence was able to hold firm. Very well organised defence that's going to take a lot more than what Canada were throwing at them to get out of there. England couldn't clear their lines from the kick, and there was further pressure from the Ravens. Again, England holding firm, despite a very much changed side from this team that played against Brazil. It was a fairly even contest at times. Both sides were trying to settle, but Holly Dodd managed to break open the defence with late footwork close to the line to crash over to increase England's lead. A great crossfield kick from Wingfield Hill found Tara Stanley in space after a penalty got England in good ball position. Stanley finding Georgia Wilson in the corner. England began to press the ascendancy, going close with Roberts and Wingfield Hill before Dodd crossed for her second. Fran Goldthorpe exposed the narrow defence of Canada off the base of a scrum to cross before superb footwork from Georgia Roche burst through and raced 40 metres to score. Canada looked tired. England began to cut loose. Good scrambling defence did hold the score to 30-0 at the break, but it was evident from watching the game, Canada's defence was extremely narrow, and England were easily able to expose them on the edges. It was a clear ploy to try and contain the England pack, and it just wasn't working. The halves are very skillful for England and were able to really cause the Canadians problems. With just two passes, we're able to get around the very narrow defence. Two monstrous carries from both props from the restart before quick hands out wide sent Tara Stanley in with a perfect start for England in the second half. Stanley then tormented the defence with a superb solo effort, which I think she'll be disappointed about she didn't score. She nearly cocked it up entirely. A mistake from the restart, though, Canada had an opportunity close to the England line. And a good offload found Petra Woods out wide to dive over and put the Ravens on the board, which was what they deserved at the very least. England responded strongly. Big defence restricting yards forward and were on the front foot as soon as they regained the ball. Two great cutout passes gave them a 4-on-1 overlap out wide for Roberts to cross again exposing the very narrow defence of Canada, who just weren't able to slide and get across to cover in time at all. Another mistake from the restart. Canada had good ball again, but poor ball movement broke down the attack. Canada retained possession, but brilliant defence on their own line by England held them at bay. Canada were then offside at a kick when penned deep in their own half. All of a sudden, England had the ball on their line and they made them pay. Good hands to find Stanley to cross for her hat-trick. The Ravens did manage to build some pressure and get close to the line, but England's defence was rock solid all day, holding them short and then quickly turning defence into attack. A bursting run from first Tara Stanley, then Wingfield Hill, before Leah Burke caught a neat kick out wide to cross over. Play began to break down a little as the rain started to come down heavier, but it was a strong win for England, who secured their place in the semi-finals. Canada will take heart from the second half efforts, and at times it did trouble England, but unfortunately their World Cup is over. They've only got pride to play for now, and will probably rue the defensive shape, really, as they didn't give themselves any chances against a very skillful England side. Player of the match, Vicky Molyneux. An excellent performance, showed great grit in defence and carried the ball strongly throughout in a workhorse performance. England are looking strong going in towards the semi-finals, but they'll have to tighten up on the errors if they're going to get past either Australia or New Zealand. Next, Papua New Guinea versus Brazil. Brazil were caught cold at a short kickoff at the start. There was danger immediately, but for the last pass going to ground. Credit to Brazil's defense that was able to stand firm. The Amazonas tried to ship the ball and created some space, but were unable to complete their set of six. A big hit from Elsie Albert forced a knock on before Papua New Guinea powered over out wide with the very impressive Belinda Guasaman. Brazil were getting bodies into the tackle to try and combat the physicality of the Orchids. While with ball in hand, they were trying to keep it alive. Their offloading game was certainly causing a few issues for the Orchids, but fierce tackles from the PNG side, the kind that we'd be proud of seeing in the men's game, just dominated and almost bullied the Brazilian team. There was a scrappy period of the game when neither side could really keep hold of the ball, but uncharacteristic good hands from the side and able to hold on for a change. So Tara Moxon crossing the corner for PNG for her first try. A massive hit from Barth from the kickoff gave Brazil good field position, but they dropped the ball at the base of the scrum and it came to nothing. PNG nearly scored off the back of this with a powerful carry from Humo bursting away. She just couldn't quite find the final pass. It didn't matter though, as Butler intercepted a very loose pass from Brazil to cross again for the Orchids. The conditions were not helping either side. It was causing numerous handling errors in the wet. An opportunity, though, presented itself for the Orchids again. It was only desperate tackling that was able to prevent them scoring yet another one. And a penalty for messing around gave Brazil the chance to clear their lines. Once again, soft mistakes handling the ball put themselves right back on the back foot. They did manage to hold up well. They did manage to defend their line with good scrambling defense, and they actually forced the Orchids in touch with very good cover. But again, Brazil failed to complete the following set of six, and Guasaman burst through the middle to slide over under the posts. Brazil found touch from the following restart and got good territory. Once again, same story. Handling, letting them down. They finally were able to keep all the ball, and with Mora and Barth were causing some real problems, really throwing themselves into tackles and growing in confidence. It was only 18-0 at the break. A little more smarts from Brazil, and it could actually be a real contest. They just need to up that completion rate and be able so they can actually build some field position. PNG, however, had other ideas and came out of the traps flying in the second half, led by Elsie Albert with some barnstorming runs, who scored after Brazil were forced into touch with a huge run off a crash ball 10 meters out. Minutes later, and the forwards burst through again, Reeves going 50 meters through some tired-looking tackles. Another score moments later ended the contest. A wonderful step from Karoy close to the line, and it was 36-0. A kick behind the defense then wasn't dealt with by the Brazilian winger, and Guasaman was able to make her hat-trick. 22 points in the opening 13 minutes of the second half, and PNG had it all wrapped up. Tara Moxon crossed again after some good hands from Dela Cruz, while Brazil finally got their hands on the ball 17 minutes into the second half. They were unable to make it count, though, an error close to the PNG line on the second tackle. Guasaman then tore through the defence to get her fourth try, and it looked like PNG could score yet again, but desperate tackling holding them out. Brazil threw the ball around and started to look dangerous again on the edges as both sides tired, but PNG had more than enough to contain the threat before Shirley Joe crashed over the Orchids after hammering away at the Brazilian line. Malawi, Malabag, and Aton all added further scores as PNG brought up 70 points. What ended this one was 5 tries in the opening 15 minutes of the second half. It completely took the fight out of Brazil, who just couldn't handle the direct and physical style of the Orchids in the second half at all. You now have a very tasty game with England to see who will top the group. Player of the match for me is Elsie Albert, a superb captain's knock, massive yards, and a great shift in defence, and was responsible largely for the huge turnaround with their carries early in the second half, setting the tone for the monstrous momentum shift in the Orchids' favour. Now to Group B, New Zealand against the Cook Islands. The Cooks needed a response in the first game, and it certainly wasn't going to be any easier against the 3-time champions. The Ferns came out with real intent, and the Cooks struggled against a relentless defence. That being said, they did hold onto the ball a lot better than they did against Australia and were completing their sets, which gave them more of a chance. As the early going, both sides tried to find a foothold in the wet and settle into this clash. It was the Ferns, though, who struck first. A dummy and a step from Racine McGregor saw a burst through the defence to stroll over under the posts. A dart from dummy half out on the left edge saw Rota score after overpowering the defence, exposing a gap after the Cook's defender was left on the floor. The rain got heavier and heavier, which made handling a lot more difficult for both sides. The Cooks struggled with the physicality of the Ferns, numerous players going down under the fierce tackles. But to their credit, would not give in, putting some big hits of their own, forcing some errors as the game really started to struggle for cohesion and fluidity. The Cooks were creating opportunities, but the ball going to ground and they were unable to capitalise. Ferns were also guilty of putting the ball down, but were playing at a much higher tempo, which found the Cooks on the back foot, and Amber Hall crashed over from close range to make it 14-0 after half an hour. Cooks finally managed to get the ball close to the Ferns line and started trying to build pressure, but without any real directness in attack. The Ferns were able to hold firm. It was a fairly simple game plan. Cooks tried to batter through the middle without any real shape or rhythm to their attack. While on the other side, it was only desperate tackles that were holding the Ferns out. A much better defensive display from the Cooks, but the writing was on the wall that they would fade deep into the game. The second half had a very scrappy start, neither side really finding any momentum in attack, and it became evident that the Ferns were getting frustrated, mistakes really disrupting their flow. The Cooks forced a mistake close to the Ferns line with a really good hit from Wiki, but a huge hit on their own line in defence. The Ferns were able to survive unscathed. Desperate defending from the Cooks prevented several scores before Racine McGregor added her second to finally break the stubborn Cook defence. Ferns nearly scored again immediately as McGregor tore through, but chose to go herself, caught by a great covering tackle, and the attack came to nothing with yet another handling error. Hafanga added a try in the corner to secure the win for New Zealand. The Cooks just couldn't handle the increased pace. Their efforts to slow the Ferns down, Hunapo got yellow carded for a professional foul after a break up the middle for holding down despite a fantastic cover tackle. Though it may have been a player down, the Cooks kept trying, and Mackenzie Wiki was first to react to a kick behind the defence after a lovely offload found Stevens in space to get close to the Ferns line. The Cooks finally had their first points on the board. Though the Ferns were able to capitalise on the one-woman advantage as Hafanga crossed for her second try off the back of a 4-on-2 overlap. A crash ball off a penalty on the line saw Nuasala score to add some gloss to the victory. But I'm sure the Ferns will be pretty frustrated with the result. Player of the match, Racine McGregor, just as against France, everything good through the Ferns came through her. Tries or assists. She had a really controlled performance leading them around the park. They'll be a bit disappointed with the scoreline, especially after what Australia did to the Cooks. Lastly, Australia versus France. This one started ominously. The French not even making out their own 10-metre line in the first set of 6, and the Aussies hammered at the door. A very fortunate set restart was given for Australia before Shazolka crossed in that corner. The Gillaroos then tore through straight from the restart and again attacked with their left edge before Chapman went through a huge hole before stepping the fullback to cross over. Although there were two very flat passes in the build-up, they could count themselves very fortunate for that score to be given. Some appalling calls then followed from the Australian referee, saw a set restart given to the Gills, despite their player very clearly holding onto the French player's shirt in the tackle, pulling her back into the pulling her back in. Nothing she could do about it, but of course, has to go the Australian way, right? Surges then crossed over after some very good attacking shape. Chapman then tore through some very soft defence, and it was 24-0 after 11 minutes. The Gills were then able to take advantage of the French short numbers while Beville was down injured, as Aiken latched on to a kick behind the defence before Surges burst through again. A few question marks about the final pass, as is a consistent theme in this game, but it was now 6 scores in 17 minutes. The French were completely wilting in defence. Aussies cutting through at will. Again, some contentious passes that looked quite forward before France finally got second use of the ball after 20 minutes. Didn't last long though. A huge hit saw them knock on in their own 20-meter area, and Tonagato side through off the scrum base for the seventh try. There was a few-minute reprieve where France finally got them some ball, but this ended with a crash ball from close range. The power, speed, and precision of Australia was just far too much for the French, who even when they tried to get numbers in the tackle, were being bounced off or left on the floor, scattering the defensive line. Australia continued to get leeway with continual forward passes out of dummy half, but France were able to force an error to get a little bit of justice. The Gills did not need any help overturning the French at all, but being allowed to get away with blatant forward passes out of dummy half enabled them to continue rolling forward relentlessly. The French did get some pride on their line, holding the Gills at bay finally for a set, before winning a penalty to try and get some ground forward. Punishing defence forced an error again, and the ball stayed, as always, in the French half. Polite added a ninth try after good link play from the half, saw a pass from Aiken out wide to cross out in the corner, before Sergis stormed clear down the right to stroll over for a hat-trick. A harsh ball steal call against France gave the Gills good territory, but it came to naught as a similar incident was then followed up, giving us a knock-on. 58-0 at half-time. And while passes going forward and looking very flat, they are obviously going to hurt the French because everything was going Australia's way, but the Aussies don't need help. They were infinitely superior to the French in every single way on the field, and it was just relentless, ruthless masterclass from Australia. Although you'd like to see the refs getting these calls from time to time because, like, come on, they didn't need the help. They didn't need it at all. A nasty spiral kick wasn't dealt with at the back by France, and Sergis was on hand to claim her fourth try of the game in the first set of the second half. Another error close to the French line, and they were again punished. Good hands out wide, and Simpson crossed over. France finally got ball in the Australian half after the fullback wasn't able to deal with a deep kick from the French trying desperately to clear their lines, but they dropped the ball at tackle one. Play began to get scrappy as Australia eased off a little before Kernick hit a great line and tore through the defence to score. The ref finally caught one of the forward passes from Australia. The French were able to ground out some good field position. Again, an error after a big hit, it came to nothing. A French error in a messy play the ball saw Chapman cross over after another neat pass from Tonagato. A big hit from Beville got the French crowd cheering, but it was short-lived, and Simpson crossed again in the right-hand corner. The Aussies nearly had 90 when a crash ball was held up just over the line before good offloading saw Sergis or Robinson complete a hat-trick. Good scramble defence on the line with a few minutes to play ensured that France wouldn't be hit for 100. Despite this, though, Polite did manage to power from the corner in the last minute to wrap it up at 92-0. The player of the match for me was Sergis. She had an absolute clinic, superb lines all night, 4 tries, and created several for a winger outside. It will take a truly powerful side to stop the Gills. France just couldn't live with the speed, power, and skill of them, and must now pick themselves up for the battle for pride against the Cooks. Australia will look ahead to their game with New Zealand and trying to determine who will top Group B now. So what do we have for round 3? Well, all 4 semi-finalists are confirmed. We just don't know who's finishing where. England will take on Papua New Guinea. Both sides have had an excellent start to the World Cup, looking very good in attacking shape for England especially. They haven't really been tested in defence yet, something the Orchids will certainly bring with their powerful pack. And they're looking good out wide as well, the likes of Wasserman looking very strong on the edge. So it won't be an easy game for England. And as we know with their history with PNG, it's a back and forth rivalry. This could be one of the best games of the tournament. The other game sees Brazil against Canada in a match for pride. Canada have the experience and probably look the stronger of the two. But Brazil's offloading game has caused England and Papua New Guinea problems. And if they can attack the edges of Canada with their narrow defence, they could have some joy out there. It could be a really good game. I'm expecting Canada to win this one, but don't expect it to be a massive scoreline like the other 2 games have been. In Group B, there's only one game to really pay attention to, and that is Australia against New Zealand, determining who finishes top and who finishes second. Both have blitzed through their opening two games. Australia definitely look the better of the two right now, but the Ferns are good. If they can get firing with their powerful pack and build a platform for McGregor to play off, they could really cause the Gills some issues, who are yet to concede a single point in this tournament. France play the Cook Islands in another match of pride and have been battered all over the park in both their opening games, both teams. The Cooks have a bigger pack and could attempt to do the same. The French, it's not going to be an easy day at the office, but France do have the skill in the players to cause the Cooks issues and to be able to get round them. If the conditions are good, France could get some joy in this one, or if they're drawn into a battle of the forwards, it could be a historic day for the Cook Islands. So those are the games coming up. Let me know down in the comments which game you enjoyed the most out of round two. Who do you think is going to win in round three? Who do you think will top each group? That's going to be the big question here. But thank you all so much for watching. I've been your host, Super Saiyan Blue Lucario. Until next time, it's time for me to have a cup of tea.